The Whispering Windmill. The envelope arrived on an unassuming Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't marked by a stamp or postmark, yet somehow it had found its way to my mailbox. Plain and yellowed with age, the paper bore only my name, written in a spidery, trembling hand. Inside, the card was simple. The ink faded as though it had been written decades ago. The text was brief. "Come see what the wind speaks of. The mill turns again." Below the message was an address. Deepfield Lane, just outside the small town of Graysmere. I stared at it for a long while, trying to make sense of it. Graysmere was a place I had heard of but never visited. It was a dot on a map, a fading memory of a town that had once thrived in another era. My logical mind dismissed the invitation as a prank, some sort of elaborate joke meant to rattle me. Yet beneath my skepticism, I felt a strange, almost magnetic pull. The next few days passed in a haze. The note was never far from my thoughts. I found myself researching Graysmere and, more specifically, Deepfield Lane. What I uncovered only deepened my unease. The windmill stood at the end of that forlorn road, a relic of the past that had been abandoned for nearly a century. The townsfolk avoided it, whispering of curses and unexplained tragedies. I read about the Miller family who had operated the windmill until their mysterious disappearance one stormy night. Some claimed to have heard voices carried on the wind near the mill, strange, mournful murmurs that seemed to call out to passers-by. Every fiber of rationality in me screamed to ignore the invitation, but I couldn't. By Friday evening, the compulsion had become unbearable. My curiosity was a gnawing hunger, and I convinced myself that the only way to silence it was to go. The drive to Graysmere was quiet, the winding roads flanked by dense woods. The sky above was bruised with storm clouds, and a damp chill seeped through the car, though it wasn't particularly cold. By the time I reached Deepfield Lane, twilight had turned the world into a wash of muted grays. The windmill rose in the distance, a jagged silhouette against the horizon. Its blades turned lazily, though there was no wind. I parked the car at the entrance of the lane and hesitated. The holiday spirit board. The snow fell softly that Christmas Eve, blanketing the small neighborhood in a serene silence. Yet, as the fire crackled warmly in the living room, a chill lingered that had nothing to do with the cold outside. It began with my cousin Anna, who had unearthed the Ouija board from the attic. "Look what I found," she said, her voice tinged with mischief as she brushed dust off the faded wooden surface. Her fingers traced the ornate carvings around its edges, the letters and numbers gleaming faintly under the dim light of the chandelier. "Anna," I said, half laughing but already uneasy. "You can't be serious. That thing is ancient." "That makes it perfect," she shot back. "Come on, we'll call it a family bonding activity." My aunt shook her head from the corner. "It's Christmas Eve. Let's keep things cheerful." But the suggestion had already piqued curiosity. The board ended up on the coffee table in the center of the room, surrounded by cousins and second cousins, all grinning nervously as the planchette was placed on the board. The adults, sipping mulled wine in the kitchen, pretended not to notice as we arranged ourselves in a circle. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the planchette. The firelight cast strange shadows across its surface, distorting the words, "goodbye," into something unreadable. I glanced at Anna, who was already pressing her fingertips to the wooden piece, daring me to join her. "Fine," I muttered, my voice firmer than I felt. As the others joined in, we exchanged uneasy glances. The room felt darker suddenly, the candles flickering despite the absence of a breeze. Anna's voice broke the silence, her tone light, but with a hint of challenge. "If there are any spirits here, we welcome you. Please, give us a sign." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the fire crackled loudly, sending a burst of sparks into the air. We all jumped, laughing nervously as someone joked about the timing. But then the planchette moved. At first, it was subtle, a faint twitch beneath our fingers. I locked eyes with Anna, whose grin faltered as the piece jerked again, this time with more purpose. It slid across the board, the sound of wood scraping against wood sharp in the silence. WHO, Anna read aloud, her voice trembling. IS. We stared, frozen, as the planchette completed its movement. HERE. Who's here? My cousin Tom blurted, his voice louder than intended. The candles dimmed, their flames shrinking to faint flickers, and a sudden chill swept through the room. I wanted to pull my hands away to break the circle, but something in the air pinned me in place, a weight that pressed on my chest and made breathing shallow. The whispers grew frantic, urging me to open it. I hesitated, my instincts screaming to leave it untouched. But the compulsion was too strong. With a sharp tug, I broke the rusted lock and lifted the lid. Inside lay a relic, a strange carved object that looked like a twisted amalgamation of bone and metal. It was shaped like a wheel, its spokes jagged and uneven, and its surface was etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. The moment I touched it, the grinding stones below roared to life. The entire windmill trembled, the walls groaning under the sudden, violent motion. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, and for the first time, they formed a coherent sentence. The curse must feed. A sharp pain shot through my hand, and I dropped the relic. Blood welled from a deep gash across my palm, dripping onto the floorboards. The room grew impossibly cold, and I felt the presence of something massive and ancient bearing down on me. The grinding stones below thundered, and I realized with dawning horror that they weren't just moving. They were hungry. I stumbled back, clutching my bleeding hand. The whispers subsided, replaced by a low, guttural sound that rumbled through the windmill. It was laughter, deep and mocking, echoing from the very walls. I fled down the staircase, the grinding stones roaring louder with each step. When I reached the ground floor, I didn't look back. I burst through the door and into the night, the laughter following me until I reached the safety of my car. I couldn't stay away. The relic haunted my dreams, its jagged edges spinning endlessly in my mind's eye. The whispers returned, stronger than before, and now they carried a demand. Restore the balance. It wasn't a choice. It was an order. I drove back to the windmill the next night, my body trembling with fear and resignation. The structure loomed before me like a sentinel, its blades spinning faster now, cutting through the still air with a deep, mechanical groan. Inside, the grinding stones were already turning, their movements slow and deliberate. The air was thick with an unseen force, heavy and suffocating. The relic lay where I had dropped it, its surface gleaming faintly in the dim light. I approached it cautiously, the whispers guiding me forward. Take it, they urged. You must take it. I hesitated, but the grinding stones groaned louder, their edges gleaming with something wet and dark. My bleeding hand throbbed, as if the relic were calling to it directly. With a deep breath, I picked it up. The windmill shuddered violently, and the grinding stones stopped. The whispers faded into silence, replaced by a singular voice, deep, resonant, and full of authority. You have claimed the pact, it said, and so the balance must be paid. The room darkened and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, impossibly so, its form shifting like smoke. Its face was a mask of jagged angles, and its eyes burned with a cold, otherworldly light. The mill must turn, it continued, its voice echoing in my skull. The stones must grind. What are you? I whispered, my voice trembling. I am the keeper, it replied, bound to this place as you now are. The curse demands its toll. You will feed it, or it will consume you. The relic in my hands grew warm, its surface pulsating like a heartbeat. I understood now, understood the role I had unwillingly accepted. The grinding stones weren't just tools of industry. They were vessels of the curse, meant to crush more than just grain. They need blood, the keeper said. The grinding stones groaned, their edges gleaming like teeth. You must choose, the keeper continued. Feed the mill, or let it feed on you. The air grew colder, and the windmill's blades began to spin faster. The ground beneath my feet trembled, and the relic in my hands pulsed with an unbearable heat. I realized then that the pact was not a contract. It was a trap. The windmill had chosen me, and there was no escape. The grinding stones roared, and the keeper's laughter echoed through the night. I stood frozen in the shadow of the grinding stones, clutching the relic as the keeper's words thundered in my mind. Feed the mill, or let it feed on you. The air around me thickened, pressing against my chest. The grinding stones groaned again, and I swore I could see something moving within their grooves, a dark, viscous substance oozing like blood from the jagged edges. I stumbled back, my gaze darting to the doorway. But before I could move, the windmill's door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. The sound echoed like a death knell, final and unyielding. "You cannot leave," the keeper intoned, its voice a cold whisper that seemed to seep into my very bones. "You are bound. The curse demands it." The relic in my hand pulsed, its warmth growing into a searing heat. The symbols carved into its surface writhed as if alive, their sharp edges slicing faintly into my palm. I tried to drop it, but my fingers wouldn't obey. It was as if the object had fused with my skin, rooting itself in my flesh. The grinding stones rumbled louder, their hunger palpable. The keeper stepped closer, its shifting form towering over me, its face a nightmare of jagged lines and hollow, glowing eyes. "You were chosen," it said, each word a blade slicing through my sanity. "Do you not hear them?" The whispers returned, 1,000 voices rising in a mournful cacophony. They called to me, their cries weaving together into a single plea. "Free us!" I stumbled forward, the weight of the relic pulling me toward the grinding stones. I tried to resist, but the air grew heavy, crushing me with its unseen force. The voices grew louder, their desperation a relentless tide that threatened to drown me. "Please!" one cried. "End this!" another begged. But one voice rose above the rest, a deep, guttural tone that carried a cruel satisfaction. "Do as the mill demands." I gritted my teeth, my free hand clutching at the edge of the grinding stones for support. The cold metal bit into my palm, but I didn't care. I had to make a choice, and quickly. I thought of the Miller family, their whispered stories of tragedy and disappearance. Had they faced the same choice? Had they stood here, relic in hand, and given themselves to the curse? The keeper seemed to sense my hesitation. Its form shifted, smoke and shadow coalescing into something more solid, more menacing. It loomed closer, its hollow eyes piercing through me. "You will not defy the mill," it hissed. "You will fulfill the pact." The relic burned hotter, the symbols now glowing with an eerie light. The grinding stones beneath me shuddered, their grooves widening as if anticipating the blood they craved. The whispers turned to screams, each voice crying out in agony. My vision blurred, the room spinning as the weight of the curse pressed down on me. And then I understood. The relic wasn't just a tool of the curse. It was a key. It was meant to unlock the true nature of the windmill, to bind me to it in a way that could never be undone. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling but resolute. The keeper's form wavered, its jagged face contorting into something resembling a sneer. "You cannot resist," it growled. But I had to try. With every ounce of strength, I hurled the relic into the grinding stones. The metal and bone shattered on impact, the sharp crack echoing through the windmill like a thunderclap. The keeper screamed, its voice a guttural roar that shook the very walls. The grinding stones buckled, their motion faltering as the cursed machinery fought against my defiance. The whispers fell silent, replaced by a deafening stillness. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought I had won. But then the windmill roared to life. The grinding stones surged forward, spinning faster than ever before. The walls trembled, splinters raining down as the entire structure groaned in protest. The keeper's form expanded, its shadow engulfing the room, its voice a hurricane of rage. "Foolish mortal!" it bellowed. "You cannot unmake the curse!" The relic's remains glowed faintly within the grinding stones, their light dimming as the machinery consumed them. A cold wind tore through the windmill, sharp and biting, carrying with it the anguished cries of the trapped souls. I stumbled toward the staircase, desperate to escape. But as I reached the first step, the ground beneath me gave way. The wood splintered and I fell, crashing into the space beneath the grinding stones. The air down there was suffocating, thick with dust and the metallic stench of blood. I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering as I scanned the darkness. The grinding stones loomed above, their edges gleaming like teeth. And then I saw them. Figures emerged from the shadows, their forms translucent and broken. They were the souls bound to the curse, gaunt, hollow-eyed, their bodies twisted by centuries of torment. One stepped forward, a woman with a face that was both familiar and horrifyingly distorted. Her eyes locked onto mine, and she spoke in a voice that was barely more than a whisper. "You were supposed to save us," she said, her words heavy with despair. I tried," I stammered, backing away. The grinding stones above groaned louder, their motion frantic and erratic. The keeper's voice returned, thunderous and cruel. "You belong to the mill now." The figures closed in, their faces masks of anguish and accusation. The grinding stones shuddered, their hunger palpable, their roar drowning out my screams. As the darkness consumed me, the last thing I heard was the windmill's relentless whisper. The curse must feed. The windmill still stands on Deepfield Lane, its blades turning against the windless sky. Travelers say they hear voices carried on the breeze, faint and mournful, calling out for freedom. But none dare enter. The grinding stones turn, and the whispers continue.